and welcome to Tech Tent, your weekly status update on the technology business. I'm Rory Cellan-Jones. Now, this week and next, we've got a slightly shorter programme than usual, and that means the tent is a little less crowded, but I am joined... Hello and welcome to Tech Tent, your weekly status update on the technology business. I'm Rory Cellan-Jones. Now, this week and next, we've got a slightly shorter programme than usual, and that means the tent is a little less crowded, but I am joined from the BBC Tech Desk by Dave Lee. Welcome, Dave.
Hello, Rory.
Now, first this week, if you're not immersed in the world of video games, you may not have heard of Gamergate. And if you are, you may be groaning and wishing you'd never heard of the term. Gamergate is a Twitter hashtag whose supporters say is about the ethics of games journalism. But for many women in the games industry, it's about a campaign of hate, harassment and sustained misogyny. We asked Dave Lee to step back and try to explain the affair.
Supporters of the movement say it's a rallying call against corrupt games journalism and reporters that are too close to the people and companies they cover. But others say that crusade is little more than a smokescreen for something that has existed for years. Deep, misogynistic views in an industry that until now has been dominated by the wants and needs of young men. For years, to be a gamer meant to be part of a tight-knit club, but the gaming community is having to grow up. Gamers are now young and old, male and female. It has moved from the niche to the mainstream. For the first time, the artistic and ethical content of the games is taking centre stage, and it's kicking off a bitter war.
Welcome to our multi-part video series exploring the roles and representations of women.
Back in March, feminist blogger and media commentator Anita Sarkeesian published the first in a series of videos examining the depiction of women in games. The videos proved highly controversial. Sarkeesian was quickly subjected to a hate campaign. She was sent pictures of herself, manipulated to look as if she was being raped by video games characters. Others made threats on Twitter. Her detractors said she was raising invalid and inaccurate points about women in games, forcing political correctness where it wasn't needed. Some expressed a worry games were in danger of being judged for their worthiness rather than their quality, pointing to one title in particular, a game called Depression Quest by independent developer Zoe Quinn. Dealing with issues around her own battle with depression, the game received positive reviews. But one act would change everything and set the tone for weeks to come. A blog post by Quinn's former boyfriend made allegations that Quinn had had a relationship with games journalist Nathan Grayson, a writer for website Kotaku. It was alleged that Grayson then went on to publish a good review of Quinn's game. Yet while reports of the relationship proved true, Grayson never actually wrote a review of Quinn's game. Regardless, Quinn soon became a central hate figure. Like Anita Sarkeesian, she too was subjected to death threats and rape threats against her and her family.
Next time she shows up at a conference,
said one comment,
we give her a crippling injury that's never going to fully heal.
Fearing for her life, Quinn left her home to stay with friends. So too had Sarkeesian. Her third video in the series had been published and the threats had escalated. She tweeted,
"Some very scary threats have just been made against me and my family. I'm contacting the authorities now."
Later she added,
"Staying with friends tonight. I'm not giving up, but this harassment of women in tech must stop."
By now, the controversy had a name, Gamergate, coined by actor Adam Baldwin, one of the movement's most vocal supporters. Accusations of misogyny, he said, were deflecting from the real issue of corruption in journalism, while stories published by Breitbart journalist Milo Yiannopoulos suggested regular collusion amongst games writers.
The emails that prove video game journalism must be reformed.
It was a determined attempt to distance Gamergate from the vicious language used by many that were now associated with it, something that frustrated Gamergate backers like Harry Bradshaw.
The original Gamergate was out to condemn personal threats, support women in gaming, but be against biased and corrupt game journalism. But there was a few people, probably the same crowd that were giving threats to Anita Sarkeesian, have jumped on that as an excuse to really just berate and get onto women in gaming and almost try and push them out.
The debate has become undeniably toxic, and the sides have blurred. But more recently, another hashtag has emerged, Stop Gamergate 2014. It has quickly gained a wide breadth of support. Because whatever your view on Gamergate and the motivations that have driven it, the consequences are indisputable. Women have been driven from their homes and left fearing for their lives because they expressed opinions online. Countless more have now been left too afraid to say anything at all.
So that's Dave Lee's explanation. Now, one of the women attacked over recent weeks is Brianna Wu, a games developer who was forced to flee her home after receiving death threats on Twitter. She had been an outspoken critic of Gamergate, and she hasn't been intimidated into halting that criticism. When I spoke to her, I asked her what had made her take the threats seriously.
I, as a woman in technology, I receive harassment and rape threats and things like that, sadly, on a regular basis. The reason I took this one so seriously, there is information that the police have that I can't talk about publicly, but it does make me feel these threats are very genuine.
What does this say about the wider culture of gaming and of technology in general?
I think, sadly, right now, there is a war on women in technology. Certainly, especially my subset of technology, video games. These same people that are harassing me and have sent me death threats, they've been going through the games industry and they've been taking out women in this industry one by one by harassing them to the point that they just leave. They've done it to my friend Samantha Allen. They did it to Maddie Bryce. They did it to Jen Frank. They've tried to do it to Lee Alexander. They've tried to do it to Anita Sarkeesian. And they've tried to do it to my friend Zoe. And what's so frustrating is the views I advocate are not, something extreme, like let's get rid of all violent video games or we need to make sure there are no Call of Duties or something ridiculous like that. What I advocate professionally is companies looking at their hiring practices to make sure they're hiring women. The industry looking at how they portray women in their games, to make sure it's in a socially responsible way. Men kind of understanding some of the ways women get talked over in this field. So the things I want are, I think, extremely reasonable. But even for speaking up on that, I get death threats and harassment to the point I can't even live at my home.
The people supporting this Gamergate hashtag say it's actually about a cultural war in gaming, that they're only interested in gaming, they're not interested in feminist issues and so on, and they say there's a kind of corruption in gaming journalism.
Right. That is certainly their party line, but what is happening with the Gamergate movement is it's going after all these women that I've described. I don't know a single woman in technology right now that is not terrified of being next. Of being attacked by this mob, of being harassed out of her job.
And social media more generally, we used to be optimistic, didn't we, about the power of the web to bring us all together and have free and open discussion. In general,
right.
It's turning into a disaster area, isn't it?
One of the funniest things for me is I remember when I was a teenager in the 90s, and I would go to the internet to get away from the real world. And now I go to the real world to get away from the internet. So... yeah, it's kind of, I think sometimes we invent a technology and then we, kind of discover the consequences of that technology. And I think that's exactly what's happening right now. I think we're finding out that, these wonderful technologies like Twitter that connect us, can also really fragment us.
Brianna Wu there. This is Tech Tent from the BBC World Service. I'm Rory Cellan-Jones. Shortly we'll be hearing from a